Hey, I'm going to show you how to break in a pair of boots. These are the made in England Doc Martens, and they are notoriously hard to break in. I've used this technique when I was a firefighter. I've done tons and tons of hunting and hiking, and I've gone through tons of boots, and this technique works better than any other technique I've seen. Like on YouTube, there's tons of videos of like, you gotta wear them in the bath every time you shower for 2 weeks, and beat it with the hammer, or wear your boots into the ocean. There's always like strange ways to break in boots. None of those techniques are as easy, and they don't work as well as this technique. And the way we're gonna do this is, instead of just telling you it works and doing this on both boots, I'm gonna do the technique on one boot and do nothing to the other boot, and then wear both boots for a week or however long it takes. And that way we'll have a control, and we'll be able to compare it to the one that I did the technique on to see if it really works and to see how much of a difference it really makes. Now what we're gonna do is heat up the boot. You can use like a little heater like I've got, or if you've got a hair dryer. You're not heating them up so hot that you're gonna start like compromising any glue or any seams, but you're just warming it up. It's gonna open those pores and allow the oil to sink into the leather better. So we're just gonna turn this on. And I'm going to open the boot up and let the inside of the boot start heating up. Then we're gonna let that sit for, I don't know, like 5 or 6 minutes, and then start applying the oil. All right, we got the boot all heated up. It's not hot, it's just a nice warm. You can already feel the leather's a little bit more pliable. So now comes the fun and messy part. And now what we're gonna do is take our liquid mink oil and start coating the entire boot with it. I'm gonna use some paper towels just to kind of help work it in, and I'm just gonna keep coating it until it's completely soaked in as much as possible, and then let it sit for 10 minutes and just do another coat until I feel like it's really, really saturated. One thing you can do, this is something, if you really want to break your boots in fast, you can coat the inside of the leather as well, but just keep in mind that the mink oil is gonna eventually get into your socks a little bit. And then also, if you are gonna do that, avoid getting it on the actual insole and just get it on the inside of the leather. I like to use the liquid mink oil because it has a lower viscosity, so it's a lot easier to get into the pores of the leather, and it creeps into the leather a little bit easier. The pasty mink oil is gonna work fine. It's just, it won't work as well, in my opinion. All right, we got it all oiled up, and I'm covered in oil. As much as I tried to keep it in this bin, it just got everywhere. But my hands are so soft, man. Okay, but now that it's all done, we're gonna just put the heater back on it. Not too close. I don't know if this is flammable or not. That'll reopen any of those pores and help evaporate any extra oil. And then once that's absorbed, I'm gonna finish wiping it all off, and then just start wearing it. And then maybe morning and night, put some oil on it, or throughout the day, if it starts to get really dry, I'll put some more oil on it. But basically, you're just wanting to keep this boot as wet as possible or as saturated as possible so that it wears in really nicely. So now let's do a little side-by-side comparison so you can see the difference between a boot that doesn't have any mink oil and a boot that has tons of mink oil worked into it. And now I'm gonna start wearing these every single day, and we'll check back in a week or so. Okay, it's been about a week since I started breaking in these boots, and holy cow, I had no idea how big of a difference doing this with the mink oil makes. Because this boot with the mink oil, it was like comfortable within like 2 hours. Like, and granted, I coated the inside with it, and it was just completely saturated. And then this boot, after a week and a half or a week or whatever it's been, is still uncomfortable. Like right here around the top of my foot, it's still really uncomfortable, and at the end of the day, it hurts the top of my foot. And I've tried a few different lacing patterns to try to help solve that, and it still is super uncomfortable. And you can even see how much more broken in the leather is. Like, I wish you guys could feel like how soft and pliable this mink oil technique made this leather. Versus this leather, it's still so tough. And if you're like me, I hate wearing like boots that look brand new. I just feel so silly in them. So like, to me, like, I want my boots to look like they're worn, and I don't want to look like I just barely bought a brand new pair of boots. I want them to look like they're boots, that I'm actually using them for boots, and that I'm not just like, here's my brand new pair of boots, like, look at these, you know? So I prefer this look, a nice broken in, oiled and like worn in boot, rather than a pristine looking boot that looks like you only walk like 20 feet a day, you know? What other stuff do you guys want to see? Because I was thinking about doing like a wallet reviews, or like showing a little bit like the wallet world, kind of how I make my wallets and how other people make their wallets, and comparing some of the top wallet brands. Like I know there's a company called Bellroy that I've always been really curious about. They kind of claim to have really high quality stuff, but I've never seen it firsthand. So I've been really interested to see if they actually have high quality stuff. So maybe I'll do a video on that if you guys are interested in that. Now let's talk about some things that you need to consider and maybe some warnings when doing this process. Like I said earlier, don't overheat these, because a lot of these boots have, even though they're Goodyear welted, there still are like glued parts inside of it, and you don't want to over dry the leather. So you don't want to get the boots hot. You just want to get them warm so it's going to receive the oil a little bit better. One thing that is really interesting about this process, and something you need to look out for, is it's going to really darken the leather of your boots if you're not doing black boots. This boot works perfectly on black boots because it's like, how do you get darker than black? But if you're using a pair of like Red Wings that has a really light color of leather, this oil is going to darken the leather. So let me show you the difference between this coaster that I was putting the mink oil container on compared to a coaster that doesn't have any mink oil on it. I'll be back. So as you can see, like this is the coaster with no mink oil on it. This is just the leather that we use in the harnesses. And this is the coaster that has tons and tons of mink oil worked into it, because I would throw it in the bucket after oiling the boots, and I put the little container of mink oil on there, and it's like completely different colors. So if your boots look like this color and you don't want them to look like this color, this might not be the right technique for you. But there is a separate way of doing this style of break-in where you can try to save the color of the leather. If that's something you guys are interested in seeing, maybe I'll do that too. And now I'm gonna explain a little bit about how boot breaking in works and why certain techniques work, and just kind of the general, not science, but just like understanding of what happens when you break in a boot. So leather is made up of a bunch of little fibers, and these fibers, when the leather's tanned, are really tightly packed. But as you start working that leather, those fibers start to loosen up and kind of separate and soften themselves up. And so when you do this technique with the mink oil, basically you're just lubricating those fibers and softening them up and making them less brittle. So if you've ever worn out a pair of boots and you get a really bad spot near the toe or anywhere that has a lot of movement, the reason it starts cracking there and starts separating there is because those fibers have moved so much that they become dry and brittle and they start breaking. So that's why everyone says you need to oil your boots all the time, because you need to oil those fibers up and start lubricating them so that you don't have to worry about those drying out and breaking. So that pretty much wraps up the break-in boot video. This works. I knew this technique worked really well, but I had no idea how well it actually works. But let me know how it goes for you. You know, I'm curious to see how this works on other boots. Every boot that I've ever owned, it works great on. I never have done a side-by-side comparison, so now I'm a real believer in this technique I learned from firefighting. Let me know what else you guys want to see, and do me a huge favor and subscribe to this channel. I just do these for fun. And you guys subscribing allows me to do more of these and do the things that you guys want to see, because I love sharing everything about like the leather world, and like I love learning about boots. I'm not a cobbler, I'm a leather worker, but this whole cobbling world has been a really fun thing for me to kind of dive into and really get to know. So thanks for your guys' support, and 10K, we're on our way to 10K. We'll probably be there next week. And I was really hoping to wear these longer than 2 weeks, but we got to know what's inside of these. So, see ya.